So you've been watching people wholesaling properties all over YouTube, and you see these big checks and people are making all sorts of money, and you're wondering if it's a business that you should get into. So let's go over a few things to help you determine whether wholesaling is right for you. Let's go. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, are you a hard worker? Am I a hard worker? Am I willing to take the lumps and bruises that's going to take to get deals closed? Now, a lot of people say that wholesaling is simple, but it ain't easy, right? It's easy, but it ain't simple. One of the two, right? The concept of wholesaling is fairly easy. You basically get a house under contract, and then you basically sell the contract. You get it under contract for one number, and then you sell it for a higher number, right? You get the difference. And it sounds really simple, finding properties. But what they don't tell you is that finding properties can be costly, right? If you're doing wholesaling in a traditional way, you're pulling lists and then you're contacting the people on those lists. So traditional wholesaling can cost quite a few dollars just to lead up to a deal, because wholesaling is a numbers game, as a lot of people say, which means that you're going to have to call a lot of people. You're going to have to hear a lot of no's. You're going to have to hear people cursing at you. If you're texting, you may see this as well. And if you're texting, then you might burn through your numbers. Same through with cold calling. You're going to burn through numbers. You're going to have to buy new numbers as those numbers get marked as spam. If you're texting, you have to go through a process to ensure that you're doing things legally, right? People can get sued. So there are a lot of hurdles that can prevent you from getting deals if you're doing things in the traditional manner, which is why agent outreach is becoming a little bit more popular in these days, because if you're doing things business to business, it's a lot more difficult for you to be labeled as spam. You're calling an agent. Agents are supposed to field calls if they want to do business. So if you're calling a business, you're less likely to have these problems. So if you're looking at traditional real estate, traditional wholesaling, those are some of the things that you have to deal with. Now, even with agent deals or agent outreach, any sorts of deals, you have to be able to hear no. You have to be able to stomach rejection. And that may not be for everybody. Dealing with a lot of no's and hearing people tell you no, your offer is insulting, or your offer is ridiculous, or your offer is too low, or whatever the case may be, and you may have had it in your mind that your offer is the perfect number. A lot of sellers and some agents are not going to go for that. You have to have a mindset that's going to be able to deal with a lot of rejection. So that's one of the realities and things that people don't talk about as much in wholesaling, is that you have to have thick skin, right? Or you have to be prepared to negotiate with people. Negotiating is not something that's easily done if you're new and have never had to negotiate anything before. So I just had a recent conversation with a new wholesaler, and he was like, well, how do you negotiate your deals? I find it difficult speaking with agents. They don't like my numbers, and I have to negotiate. I can't negotiate. Well, negotiations are some of the things that you'll have to deal with. Another thing is having empathy and sympathy for people, because a lot of the people who you'll be calling, if you're dealing with sellers, are people who have had loss, loss of a parent, loss of a loved one. If you're dealing with probate leads, if you're dealing with people who are in pre-foreclosure or foreclosures, you're dealing with situations where people are not doing their best. They used to have this thing where they would call lawyers who would find people who were just recently in a crash, and they would call them ambulance chasers. As a wholesaler, you can kind of get the feeling that you're chasing ambulances. You're chasing these problems, people who are in bad situations with their properties. They've lost money, anything has happened, and you're basically pulling lists with data to kind of find out if people are going to sell you their house while they're in this bad predicament. So having the mindset of a caring individual is important, and not a lot of people have that right off. So if you're not somewhat of an empathetic human being, it may not be the business for you. If you are like overly empathetic or overly sympathetic, and you feel bad because you feel like an ambulance chaser, right? You feel like you're profiting off of the backs of people who are in bad situations, and you also may have problems as a wholesaler. So there are things to kind of consider if you're going into this business on both sides of that fence. Other things to consider are the amount of money you're going to make. You know, you see these people with these big, huge checks and you think, okay, well, they've made all this money, but you don't understand how much money it took them to make that check. So say somebody's showing a check for $10,000. What if their price per deal, or their cost per deal rather, what if their cost per deal is $3,000? Okay, so that means that they actually did not make $10,000, right? That's a $7,000 check. So you have to put these things in perspective. Now, there was a gentleman when I was beginning wholesaling, and I won't say his name, but there was a gentleman who was online doing what I'm doing now. He was on YouTube, and he was basically instructing people on how to make money wholesaling. And he was using the traditional way of wholesaling, which is basically sending out mail. He was doing mailers, I believe, or he was cold calling, one of the two, or maybe both. And he did this video for the end of the year, how much money he made. And he did this video and he put out how much money. Okay, he had made $90,000. Well, I wrote a comment and I said, okay, that's great. You made $90,000 in assignment fees. How much money did it take for you to make all of that? And he said, and I'm going to make a video doing that. And I will applaud him for doing this. But it really put it in perspective for me once he said that he had spent about half of that $90,000 in marketing fees. And that's when the wheels started spinning in my head, and I realized that I was going to have to do marketing differently, because I didn't want to spend half my money in marketing and only be making $50,000 a year or something like that. Like $50,000 a year is not what I thought would be the case in the wholesaling, because I was seeing all these big checks. Now, I know people who make a ton more than that, and I know some people who are regularly making about that in wholesaling. So the thing of it is you may not make millions of dollars doing this business. It's just a reality. Some people make a lot of money, others do not. And it's all about your mindset, who you are, your abilities. How willing are you to spend lots of time per day making phone calls or talking to people, however you're talking to them? That's going to be important. For me, as an introvert, it's not always easy to talk to people all day. I just don't have it in me to do that. So I know that's why I have other businesses, right? Because wholesaling for me is great and I love it. But I'm more of the person who likes to do the behind the scenes work. I like to pull lists. I like to find out new ways to do lists, which is why I kind of developed the hybrid method on hybrid wholesaling. Check that course out down below. But there are a lot of things out here that seem really, really great. And there's a lot of people pushing a lot of different type of business types. You're seeing a lot of videos nowadays where people are promoting different side hustles. And these things are all great and everything, but we're trying to build businesses, not side hustles. And if you're trying to build a business with wholesaling, there is a lot of work that you have to do that. And that's just one thing that's a reality. So if you're looking to get into wholesaling, I urge you to do as much research as you need to do your homework, because it's not as easy as it looks all the time. It is for people who have tough skin. You have to have the mindset for it. You have to be ready to be empathetic. You don't want to be too empathetic, and there's just a lot to all of this. So I just wanted to push the truth out there to let you all know that sometimes what you see is not what you get, and you got to be ready to work as hard as you can to get the deals done. All right, thanks for watching. Appreciate it.